in this lesson, I'm going to talk about what we want versus what we think we want. And Neville talks about this in many of his lectures, but specifically in a passage from At Your Command. If you've been following the traditional law of attraction community for a few years, you know a very commonly discussed topic is the difference between manifesting from ego versus manifesting from higher self. And as students of Neville Goddard, this rings an alarm bell inside our heads, because any mention of limitation or limited capabilities with regards to manifesting are things we try to avoid at all costs. But truly understanding the differences between the two can help you finally unlock your manifestations and also help you understand your own desires better. You see, Neville Goddard talks about this exact topic but indirectly, so he doesn't really use those specific words, manifesting from ego or manifesting from your higher self. In fact, he doesn't even use the word manifesting at all. But we know that how effective his methods and his teachings are. I'd often notice an itch inside my head, a little turbulence, if you want to call it. But whenever I'd imagine a scene that would imply the fulfillment of my desire, I'd always think in terms of its sustainability. Let's take the example of marriage. There are many people who want to manifest marriage with their specific person, but secretly what they want is to have a fulfilled marriage and experience a peaceful one till the end of their lives. So no one is really wishing their first year or first 2 years of their marriage life to be successful and want things to go downhill from there onwards. And yet the scene which we are imagining during ascetics is only till the event of marriage. So this doesn't really guarantee that your marriage will be a happy one in the long run. And I think as human beings, we understand that this little loophole we create for ourselves when we visualize an end scene. Recently in an email, a viewer enlightened me on what an investment this is, this whole thing of scripting, visualizing, and he doesn't really want to manifest the wrong thing or manifest a part of what he truly wants. So there's a process in figuring out what we actually want even before we start with the process of manifesting. And this is something that's rarely spoken about because manifesting is already out there relative to our limited understanding of our world. And since we've been using normal methods, or rather subscribing to this idea of causality to navigate our world, manifestation itself is a challenge, and we often overlook that important part, that is choosing what we want. To me, this idea of manifesting from ego, this shunned idea of manifesting from your ego, is exactly this one. You see, there's an inherent paradox in thinking from the end, especially thinking in terms of scenes. When we choose a scene that implies the fulfillment of our desire, we are also secretly telling ourselves that there is no other, a better scene that would imply the fulfillment of our desire. Because really think of it this way, if there really was a better scene, why would you bother with this one? Wouldn't you be choosing the better one? So this isn't me telling you definitively that manifesting this way is right or wrong. I'm merely asking you a question, and I want you as a viewer to ponder over this. Rather, a set of few questions. Is my scene implying the fulfillment of our desire, not the middle? Am I not conditioning myself as to how the end desired or the end feeling will be delivered to me? You see, when Neville said feeling is a secret, but we often look at feeling as an ingredient in the recipe of manifestation, but we don't really delve deep into what a feeling actually means. You see, feeling implies the fulfillment of your desire. That's because when your desire comes to you, you end up feeling those exact same feelings. So you start with the feeling so that you can end with the feeling. Everything else is in the middle. It's an intermediary to that feeling. So you're always aiming for a feeling, not so much a fact. Now, sometimes as human beings in this 3D world, we think in terms of scenes that implies the feeling, and that's okay. That's not a problem, because there are countless people who've manifested using SATs. Some manifested things that were in accordance to their original intention, while others ended up manifesting the scene, but the results were not so happy, in the sense they ended up manifesting things that they did not really want, despite the end scene unfolding in the exact manner that they had visualized. So you see how there are these two distinct chasms of people who are both successful in terms of implementing SATs, but how in one of those two categories success was actually kind of a failure. So when you decide on an end scene, you decide based on what you think implies the fulfillment of a desire, because you are truly relying on your past experiences and understanding of the world. So you want happiness, and say you are looking for a happy relationship with your partner, or say a generic partner, and you haven't decided on yet. So you assume that marriage is the best thing that can happen to you, and you imagine a scene, you craft a scene very accurately, and this scene itself is laced with your old ideas and your perception of what happiness is all about. So you see how you are kind of bringing the old into the new when you are limiting yourself with very specific scenes. Now let's see what Neville had to say in this regard. So I'll read a small passage from At Your Command, a book by Neville Goddard. So here how it goes. It's called "No one desires to kill another." A question often asked when this statement is made is, if one's desire is a gift of God, how can you say that if one desires to kill a man, that such a desire is good and therefore God sent? In answer to this, let me say that no man desires to kill another. What he does desire is to be freed from such a one, but because he does not believe that the desire to be free from such a one contains within itself the powers of freedom, he conditions that desire and sees the only way to express such freedom is to destroy the man, forgetting that the life wrapped within the desire has ways that he, as man, knows not of. Its ways are past finding out. Thus man distorts the gifts of God through his lack of faith. So you see in this example, a man who desires to kill a man secretly desires freedom from the man. So this desire for freedom is appearing as a desire to kill. So you see how he can totally manifest this heinous desire, but this isn't something that he wants. Rather, there are better ways, better harmless ways of him getting the same desire. So it's his own ignorance that leads him to wish such a thing. And it's a bit of a paradox, because he's combining the gifts of God, or this ability to manifest anything, with his own ignorance. So he's limiting his own godlike powers and conditioning them with a very limited outcome. Now this makes obvious sense to us because this is such an extreme example. I mean, the choices are between killing and not killing to achieve freedom, but you can substitute killing with any desire. Let's say something very mild, such as manifesting a happy relationship with your person, and you condition that desire with, say, an incident of marriage, a very specific act of let's say exchanging gifts or receiving congratulations. Now this isn't completely out of alignment and your end scene isn't controversial, but this is exactly why it's so easy to normalize this and limit ourselves from any other way, any better way that might deliver other gifts as well. This idea of holistic abundance is something that Dr. Joseph Murphy talks about in his books. This idea of compounding abundance, where if you receive one and if you are able to tap into the generic feeling, then it's very easy for you to gain abundance in other areas of life as well. I call this the paradox of limiting yourself using your own limitlessness. If anything, the ladder experiment tells us how powerful end scenes can be, and it can absolutely manifest. Anything can manifest, but sometimes the costs are something you are not taking into consideration. This best possible route in law of attraction terms is known as the path of least resistance. You might have heard of it at some point. To me, the path of least resistance is the path that minimally disturbs the rest of your beliefs. So before I discuss the path of least resistance, let's understand what a path of high resistance is. So in this example, where the man achieves his state of freedom through killing a man, is him taking a path of high resistance. Now, what is resisting? Why are we even using the word resistance in the first place? Because the thing that's resisting are the rest of your beliefs. So let's say this man who's desiring to kill or rather who thinks he's desiring to kill, might secretly believe that it's wrong to kill a person. So he has to now fight this fundamental belief of his to achieve the desire. So you see how this belief of his, this conscience, is resisting this path is taking to manifest the end state of freedom. However, if he were to allow his higher self or just trust in the process and just focus on the feeling of freedom, after gaining a little bit of additional clarity as to what he truly wants, he could have absolutely avoided that. And the same goes for any SP related manifestation. I know this is something that's very difficult to grasp, but whenever you're manifesting an SP, you are ultimately manifesting some abstract ideas, some feelings rather. You're really manifesting traits through that SP. Let's say you're wanting to manifest a new version of your SP. You would also need to contend with the past of your SP, perhaps mistakes, perhaps infidelity, lying, cheating, or whatever, so that your memories don't directly contradict your desired reality. So you would need to use revision to override some of your memories, and that is entirely possible. I'm not against manifesting SPs. The thing here is that you need to really understand the extent of specificity. Now, there are different levels of conditioning. So let's take the example of 3 versions of John. Let's say there's a guy named John, and there are 3 versions of him that exist in parallel realities. So the first version of John is focusing on the generic stuff. He's focusing on the general feeling of financial abundance, a happy family, good health, peace, and prosperity. So he's taking the holistic approach. The second version of John in another reality is being a little bit more specific. So in his affirmations and in his scripting, he's integrating some specifics. So for example, when it comes to financial abundance, let's say he mentions $1 million in his bank account, some real estate, some stock, and maybe he's just a little bit vague with the thing. He's not entirely defining every single element. When it comes to love life or an ideal partner, he's describing some characteristics, but still as abstract. So he's being a little bit more specific, maybe some physical traits, maybe some mental traits, personality wise, and so on and so forth. The third version of John is really being picky with everything. So he wants $1 million on Friday at 11 a.m. in such and such a bank account. He wants to chase the high of a stock of a stock and sort of cash out in next month during this specific day. When it comes to a partner, he has every little detail noted, including the perfume, maybe some of the partner's catchphrases. I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But let's say he's really going on, like he's writing essays and a huge book mentioning the specifics. You see, in theory, if we are truly infinite, then all of these 3 versions of John are able to manifest their corresponding desires seamlessly. Right? Because since the universe is infinite, why would the third version have any more difficulty than the first two versions? It's a very legitimate question to ask. But then this is exactly where this idea of no one desires to kill comes into the picture. You see, in essence, all three of these versions are ultimately aiming for a feeling. The third version of John thinks that if the person he's manifesting or the exact nature of financial abundance that he wishes to experience are the only routes to the ultimate feeling of abundance. So if you take a close look at Dr. Joseph Murphy's affirmations, you will notice that to the general public, he recommends some really broad affirmations. He hardly mentions becoming too specific in his scenes or in the things you want to manifest, because it's very easy to lose grasp on the central idea. Or for example, let's say you want to manifest healing, there's a good chance that you end up focusing on the disease itself. I believe it's in the second chapter of Think Yourself Rich, or the first one, I don't really remember, but I just released a chapter-wise summary and discussion a few days ago, and in one such example, there's this girl who wants to manifest her mother's healing. She has some stomach problem and she had some idea on how to manifest. So she comes to Dr. Murphy with a very unique problem. So she'd been affirming for her mother's health. So she already knew how, she had a vague idea on how this worked. And when Dr. Murphy asks her how she was doing it, what exactly her affirmations were, she told him that she was focusing on healing of her mother's intestines. And so Dr. Murphy asked her to go broader and affirm for holistic abundance as opposed to any local healing, because whenever she's focusing on any local organ, she's subconsciously focusing on the disease itself. So while in theory she's if you were to read the affirmations as an outsider, as an inexperienced manifester, you'd think that she's been doing everything correctly. So why is her mother manifesting, continuing to manifest such problems? So you see, when we are getting too specific, we are taking some of the decision-based responsibility of a higher self as a limited human being. So from this limited human vessel, we are covertly micromanaging our manifestations, and it's happening without us even knowing it. So this discussion on the specificity of your person or any desire can be stretched indefinitely. There's always something you can add to this idea. It's best to experiment with the specificity at different phases of your life, because without having first-hand experience, you could always have these little voices in your head that asks you to be more specific, right? Because you'd want to maximize on the specificity. But to me, the best strategy is to go for a sweet spot where you're able to negotiate between the two. So you can satisfy your immediate senses while also trusting the higher self. So like, you can define some traits but also leave a little bit of room and let the universe do its job. So you'll notice that people who have successfully manifested their persons, or rather versions of their SPs, altered version of their SPs, are now in different relationships or are married to different people. Now, why is that? Why are people you manifested are now your exes? And I don't ask this in a spiteful way, like in a hateful, mocking kind of way, but this is a very interesting observation that this keeps happening again and again. You see, it's one thing to manifest a specific person, and it's completely different to maintain the relationships for a sustained period. I think that sometimes our own powers to manifest anything we want blinds us the idea of what we truly want. And when people keep manifesting SPs, and some people are really good at it, they can absolutely affirm for just a few days and have that person chasing them like 24/7. So why were they unable to keep their SPs? Because clearly no one wants for a relationship to go sour. So in a sense, their ultimate desire to have a happy, healthy relationship did not get fulfilled through that SP. So they manifest the ideal relationship through a different person altogether. It's not their SP. So why do you think that there's this discrepancy between their ability to manifest their SPs but not get the thing they want from that very SP? Because I think it's the limitation of the three-dimensional human form, the human psychology, that blinds us to the truth of what we were actually wishing for while manifesting our SPs. So we keep telling ourselves that we are actually looking for these abstract traits. Let's say someone who's loving, someone who's caring, someone who listens to us, someone who doesn't play games, someone who's loyal, things of that nature, and someone who's attractive on the outside too. But you'll notice that we lose ourselves in the physical definition of that egoic version of that person so much that we are willing to compromise on anything. Like, we are willing to toy with our abstract requirements just so that we are able to interact personally with that egoic version of that person. So let's say your person was if you know the term halo effect in psychology, you know exactly what I'm talking about. To me, it's the psychology of pedestaling someone and extending their unknown characteristics and replacing those with positive ones. So let's say you find someone who's attractive and you don't know anything about them. You automatically assume that that person is very pleasant. He or she has a very good personality and all the positive traits. So your mind sort of extrapolates them and fills in the blank spaces with good characteristics. Now, the problem with this halo effect is that if you don't combat it to a reasonable extent, you often lose grasp on what's real and what isn't. And I'm not talking about imagination being reality in this context. Let's assume that your past is real, all the facts you've experienced is real for just a minute, even though they aren't. Let's assume it. Okay? You'll notice that these extra emotions and some of these traits you assume this person has isn't even based on three-dimensional facts that you experience. So you are imagining those things, yet you're doing so from a place of desperation and neediness. So instead of those facts coming into life and being reflected, this whole premise of halo effect is a reflection on your own tendency to delegate the true meaning of love and life to people outside of yourselves. It's a very subtle difference. Like I just said, that you are imagining things, but you are not imagining them into reality. You're rather doing the opposite. You are manifesting the exact opposite of what you are imagining. So you can entirely do things mechanically and trick yourself into believing that you are doing the exact things that these teachings of law of attraction or law of assumption are telling you to do. Personally, for me, looking at people who wait years for their SPs to manifest, I often notice that in focusing too much on their SPs, they are blinding themselves to the traits they're looking for in a person, and they don't even have to let go of their SP and give up on manifesting them. But rather, if you could really narrow down on what you want, then you might have a better chance. You might establish some of the non-negotiables of that person. So sort of you are adding this new dimension to them. It's like by going general, you're paradoxically getting specific on things that you really want. So you're being specific on the abstract traits rather than losing yourself to the specificity of the physical identity of your person. And by physical identity, I'm not talking about the physical beauty of a person. That can very well be a criteria. You shouldn't compromise on that. But by physical identity, I'm talking about this egoic, namely identity, this name of your person, this very solid identity of this person. And in constantly attaching yourself, you are limiting or conditioning yourself to how you manifest these traits. You might hold a secret belief that there's no other way to experience love, happiness, or manifest these personality traits other than through this very specific person. And your persistence could very easily be a cope for your desperation. So you aren't even able to identify your desperation, because that would be the first step towards you freeing yourself. You mustn't mistake this constraint of conditioning your manifestation with the idea of free will, because free will doesn't exist in the sense of you being different from the other person. I've already covered this in my video, Everyone Is You Pushed Out. I uploaded last week, so you might want to check that out as well. While I'm not asking you to completely ditch everything with regards to your SP, I'd recommend you focus on some of the abstract qualities you're looking for in your SP and design a template around that without mentioning your person. It'll give you clarity on what you're actually looking for in a person and not lose your definition in the existing definition of your SP created by past events. Ultimately, I believe that it's difficult to let go when it's an SP, when we are constantly clinging onto our past, because you can't really let go of your past sometimes without letting go of things of that nature. If I were to ask you to let go of an incident from your past, it would make perfect sense to you. But if I were to ask the same with regards to an SP, you'd call me someone who's limiting your ability to manifest, who's limiting your outlook in life. You might be secretly holding on to your past through your SP without even realizing it. You might secretly be trying to manifest out of the old version of your SP rather than manifest a new version. And these two are quite different, even though they might mean the exact same, semantic-wise speaking. You'll notice that throughout his lessons, Neville mostly speaks of some extreme stuff like everything is possible, everyone is you pushed out, nothing is impossible. I mean, it's not a direct quote, but he uses these clauses, these words: anything, everything, no one, everyone. And there are extremely small caveats to some of these, which he mentions only while addressing some of his audience's questions. Because if he were to say those things directly in the main passage or during the main speech, then it would sort of dilute some of the effects, because his ideas already challenge a view of the world. He doesn't really want to explore the caveats right away. But this example of man not wanting to murder someone but wanting something else in the process of that is a very important distinction that will clarify manifestation in ways you can never imagine. So I'd like to end this video, this discussion on manifesting from the ego, manifesting from higher self, can be extended indefinitely, and I know that this is a very delicate topic, and especially if I were to use this example of SPs. This video wasn't to draw some conclusions, but help you see things and ask yourself new questions with regards to the law of assumption. So is the law of assumption and Neville Goddard's teachings absolute and without any caveat, or are we secretly victims of spiritual egotism? Let me know in the comment section. See you again in the next video.